Welcome back, guys, to another open discussion of Ghost Recon Phantoms. Today I want to talk about what are probably the two most important aspects of any weapon in the game, namely control and accuracy, and the differences between the two, as well as the similarities. And what I mean by similarities is quite simply that accuracy and control in this game, they're a bit like non-identical twins. You can't really have one without the other, although it's theoretically possible. They're not identical twins because they're not the same, but there's a synergy. There is a working together of the two that's really important. And I think obviously for people who are advanced in this game, it's pretty obvious. Although, like I said, a lot of people are just good at shooting and they don't even notice this stuff. So let's talk about the game mechanics. Let's start with the lovely AN-94 SV Halloween Edition. Has an accuracy of 92, which is incredible for an assault rifle, and 60, so it's very accurate and has decent control. Strictly speaking, in this game, accuracy is simply describing the amount of spread a shot has from a weapon, as also it describes how quickly the spread is going to tighten when you're initially aiming at something. And the other aspect, of course, in this game is how much damage it loses over range. So we can just switch to semi-auto here, and we see, okay, a headshot causes 77 at this range, but then at 30 it's 74. There it's 77 still, and then at 70 it's 60. A little further out, more. So you can see accuracy is also relevant to the amount of damage a weapon causes and how much it decreases over range. So a weapon with poor accuracy would have a drastic decrease of damage per bullet over long ranges. But a weapon like this, the AN-94 SV, doesn't have that, for the simple reason it has very high accuracy, 92. Same is true of sniper rifles, etc. Control is, of course, in the strictest, simplest of terms, how much vertical recoil that is jumping up and down a weapon has. So you can just, if I just lie here behind cover and do nothing, you can just see this weapon, the AN-94 SV, just sort of lightly jumps up. It has a very predictable recoil, not getting a lot of bounce, too much bounce. It's very manageable, and that's what control is. But the thing is, there are other aspects to it. And now I'm actually controlling the weapon. There are other aspects to recoil, such as horizontal recoil. And that's not talked about too often, but obviously there are a lot of weapons. Let's see, if we just check out, say, the AK SV, you're going to see this has, compared to the other weapon, a lot more horizontal recoil. You can see the spread. Well, the spread is, of course, related to accuracy, but I'm going to get into this in a second, but the control determines, if you're not controlling it at all, if you're not controlling the recoil, trying to manage it with your mouse, how far the bullets are going to bounce all over the place. And you can see it's pretty jumpy, right? So it's not just with the AK 12 SV12 arc. In this case, it's not going to be just a vertical up and down recoil unless you actually control it perfectly. And you're going to have a lot more bounce, and you can see it just kind of bounces everywhere, especially at this range. Now, there's some weapons where this is a perfect example. The AK S200R. It's a submachine gun. Really, at more than 15 meters, I don't even bother firing full auto. I do semi. One headshot's usually enough. Two headshots are usually enough to kill anything, especially with Magnum. And I just fire it semi, and it has absolutely horrendous control. You can see 99 damage. Those crit shots. Absolutely horrendous control at 21, and accuracy is pretty shitty. 71 is not a good accuracy rating. So this weapon has both bad control and bad accuracy. But of course, this weapon is meant as a CQC weapon. It's not meant to really be fired at long ranges. Can you kind of get away with it? Yeah, if you switch to semi, every now and then I'll pull off a long-range headshot, but you can see it's so unstable. And if you forget about, I mean, this is just, look at that. It's just insane. Can you control it? Yeah, you can kind of control it, but it's very difficult at longer ranges. It's just very difficult. Now, I've occasionally seen questions popping up on my videos with open discussion stuff about, or just really the question of what weapon is best, and people are asking, a weapon that they can kind of settle with, that they just feel comfortable with, and they don't have to really exercise much control about. Let me just talk a little bit about controlling recoil. Now, I'm pretty good at controlling recoil, but for one, I'm not an expert, and it's a conscious effort on my part. It always is. It's not an automatic reflex. I'm almost 40 years old, so at my age, it's never going to be an automatic reflex. And sometimes in game, I'll forget. I mean, even a weapon that has pretty low recoil, such as the SVAL SV, overall, especially because of the fire rate, it has pretty low recoil. But sometimes I'll just not bother, because I'm just not concentrating well enough, and yeah, I'll get a fair amount of recoil. So there really is a difference between people who have to consciously control recoil, players, and I think a lot of it's due to age, but also experience. And if you're young and played shooters your entire life, you're young, early 20s, a lot of it's going to be reflexive. For me, who doesn't play shooters, it's the only shooter I play, and as almost 40 years old, it's a conscious effort. Can I control the recoil? I can control it pretty well. I can even control it about 100 meters reasonably well, if need be. I wouldn't recommend firing the ASVAL at 100 meters with full auto, though. Better to switch to semi. But that's really the difference between people at the end of the day. You have people who have to consciously control the recoil, and people who just do it automatically as a reflex. Anyone who's seen Mick H's videos, I mean, he's generally regarded as the best player in the game, in both continent, NA and EU. He has an ability that no one can duplicate to control recoil. Every gun he fires looks like it's a laser gun out of cover at whatever, regardless of the range. Some people can come pretty close, but yeah, any weapon just has no recoil in his hands. And he has a lot of mouse settings and settings in general that help with that, but at the end of the day, it's his skill, it's his innate talent that does it, as well as his experience. So really, if you're young enough, you can develop a feeling for controlling recoil until it becomes a reflex. If you're older like me, it's going to be a conscious effort, and you're really going to have to sometimes concentrate on doing it. And different weapons have different recoil. Now, the thing what I said about that recoil and accuracy are kind of like non-identical twins, what I mean by that is, you can have an incredibly accurate weapon, but if the recoil is shit, that is, if the control is bad, it's going to be very hard landing those shots. It's true that accuracy refers to the amount of spread a shot has, as well as how quickly the spread tightens when you're firing. But if you have a very low control, which this weapon doesn't, but still, it's just you're not going to even get the shots in. And this ultimately is the reason why I think support is such a popular and beloved class. A lot of people play support, and when you're playing a match, it's almost never the case that you are encountering people who... You always have too many support most of the time. If you're a beginner or a medium level player, or even if you're a low-level general, just someone who just doesn't want to bother, support probably is the way to go. I mean, you take a weapon such as the M96H. I've recommended particularly this setup. You put a bipod on it with the right muzzle brake. I'm using the special one. I get a 71 control, and all of a sudden, the recoil is pretty much non-existent. I mean, you can. That's the recoil without me controlling it. It's almost non-existent. For people who are really annoyed by recoil, though, the best setup you can get is still the Type 95 Modmaster. Let's check that out. Type 95 Modmaster properly set up has the lowest recoil in the entire game. I don't have it right now. Put a bipod in a CMAG. Doesn't really matter the scope very much, but we'll just stick with the full for now. Put a special. You can put on. Well, I'm using a special one, right? And then put on a long barrel. You're not going to really get a better... I mean, 76 control, decent damage, pretty high fire rate, 83 accuracy. And, I mean, it's just... There's no... I'm not even controlling the recoil here. Just look at this. So there's a direct relationship between spread and control, because how much spread you get also depends on how much you have to basically pull the cursor down to monitor the amount of vertical recoil it has. This just has vertical recoil and it's pretty much non-existent. I mean, you can full auto without any problems whatsoever at this range at 100 meters. You can pretty much do it at, I suspect, at 130. This is basically the lowest recoil setup you can have in the game, and you don't really have to control. It's just insane. But that's true of most LMGs. I mean, even others, the one I tend to use the most, which is AK200M, with my setup, has 69 control, which is plenty if you know how to control recoil a little bit. If I don't control it at all, yeah, there's a bit more jump. But if I control it, it's perfectly fine, and it's even fine at this range. And yeah, I mean, that if you don't like recoil, I personally don't like firing 100 meters at that full auto, but if you don't like recoil in this game, LMGs are the way to go. They overall have the best control stats, pretty good accuracy, and I think for the majority of players, this may be a bold statement, I think control is more important than accuracy. Unless you're a master of controlling recoil, the accuracy of the weapon is going to be actually, at the end of the day, less relevant the amount of control it has, because you're going to be struggling to control the weapon in the first place, rather than thinking, oh wow, the spread is so tight, it just lands where I'm trying to shoot it. That's kind of universally the case in my observations, why a lot of people play support. Assault rifles overall clearly have the best accuracy of any automatic weapon in the game, and with the AN-94. But obviously at a 65 control rating with a 640 fire rate, yeah, it's not a lot of recoil, but if I just kind of let it, yeah, it's a lot more recoil than any LMG. It's not, I mean, the controlling is pretty easy. Of course, if you switch to the burst mode, it has no recoil, more or less. But overall, my advice to people who just don't like dealing with recoil is to stick with LMGs. One of the reasons why I tend not to play a lot of support, apart from it just kind of being boring, is that it makes me lazy. When I play support a lot, it makes me lazy because of LMGs, because basically I don't have to put any effort to control the recoil, and I just get used to it. I mean, if I'm firing the AK or especially you know, the M96H, yeah, I mean, this is another example of actually pretty bad control. It's got a very weird control, this one. The M240. You can see it's just I'm not controlling for recoil here at all, and you can just see it just, for an LMG, that's terrible control. I mean, yeah, you can control it at range, but it takes a lot more effort. Overall, though, in my opinion, support tends to make you lazy because you don't really have to struggle much to control the weapon, with the exception of this one. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, you have to make a decision about these things, about what's most important to you. Support, in a way, as I said, is the easiest to play, just because the levels of control and the accuracy is pretty good in most LMGs. There are, of course, exceptions. I mean, if you look at the PKM, wherever that is, oh, they've gotten rid of that. That used to be an offer, but I see they got rid of it. But anyway, the PKM, the TAN. Oh, here it is. Right. This has a really interesting control pattern. You can see it's got not just horizontal but vertical issues with recoil, and so you really have to concentrate on controlling it. It's certainly not the most stable of LMGs. No. So this is the consideration, I think, that needs to be made here. I mean, depending on what kind of player you are and how you want to play the game, you're going to have to make a decision between weapons, if you're playing assault, that tend to have fairly high recoil overall, very good accuracy. But like I said, in a perfect world, you would have very good recoil, very good control, and very good accuracy. That's really rare. LMGs offer a mix, but tend to have higher control than accuracy. And I would argue, as I said before, that most players are going to benefit more from high control weapons and high accuracy weapons, because they're not the accuracy is irrelevant if you don't know how to control the weapon well enough to allow the bullets to even hit where you're trying to target in the first place, right? But like I said, my opinion, support tends to make you lazy if you play it too much, because at most ranges there's so little recoil that you don't really need to worry about it. And then all of a sudden you switch to a platform that has more recoil, and it's a problem. Now, on a final note, let me talk about the differences between bipods and grips. Grips are, as you probably know, they're for using out of cover. Most weapons, perfect example of this is the Vector. Most weapons are actually, with grips, are actually worse in cover because you have more control, you have more stability outside of cover than, because of the grip, than you would in cover. I mean, that's pretty stable for crouching at 60 meters, more or less. And once you go into cover, I mean, first off, let's just check it out without it. I mean, I'm not controlling it at all, but then you can see it's even worse to a degree in cover, and it requires more effort to control. Whereas when I'm outside of cover, it's fairly easy to control it. So once again, the high fire rate of this particular weapon gives it the illusion of having more control. I don't know if it's an illusion, but it certainly feels that way. But grips are going to give you basically more control out of cover. That's what they're used for, and you can try different setups. You know, one setup I've recommended for CQC encounters is high DPS setup, the M96H with the short barrel and the grip outside of cover. You're going to get a lot of control, and it's kind of what you need, and it can be used at most ranges this way as well. Not terribly accurate, mind you, but you know, up to 60 meters is pretty decent, and you wouldn't want to use it beyond 60 meters anyway. Bipods, of course, give you more control, but then they suffer out of cover. Those are pretty basic. But as I said, this was mostly about accuracy versus control, and things you need to look out for when you're selecting a weapon. If you have limited resources, you don't want to spend money, whatever, or you just want to play one class and try to do a good job. If you're worried about control, definitely go with support, because LMGs, in terms of weapons, are the kings of control. Assault rifles, I would not recommend them unless you have some practice controlling the recoil and dealing with that. So for some people, it's not an issue. For some people, it's a minor issue. For some people, it's a big issue. You know, just something you need to decide on your own. But anyway, I hope that was kind of helpful. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of these kinds of open discussion videos. All your views are appreciated, and I will talk to you the next time for the next Ghost Recon's open discussion. Everyone take care, and bye-bye.